Hi, it's Jeff Cohen from the Florida Healthcare Law Firm and doing the presentation today on behalf of AVA. We're going to get started in about a minute. Give folks just another minute to pop on the call. I'm not doing video, as you can see. I'm just doing the presentation along with the slide presentation. I'm doing that because when I go on a video, my normally robust IT system gets all bizarrely unstable, and then I blink in and out and nobody can hear me or see me or anything like that. So anyway, I'm not a tech guy. Okay. Okay, I'm going to get started. Thanks for being patient. I know everybody's on, well, everybody that lives in my time zone's on lunch hour, so you need time to eat sandwiches and things. Anyway, a little bit about me in case we haven't met. I've been a healthcare business and regulatory lawyer for 35 years, which is a little bizarre because it makes me sound like super old, that and white hair. Anyway, I'm part of a 10-person organization that only provides advice and legal guidance and business advice to healthcare businesses and healthcare professionals. One of the most robust areas of our practice and has become in the past, I'd say 3 years, has become IV hydration. Hence the desire to form an organization, AVA, that serves as a beacon for folks that want to get in that business and stay in the business. And also, it's one of the things that has activated a handful of us in the firm on a really demanding work schedule and also educational schedule. One of the things that you guys are going to see is, especially as you grow your business, because it's kind of a wax on, wax off kind of process of learning how to hire right and the laws that pertain and how to get things done in an effective way. And one of the things I heard long ago was this bit of advice that says, hire slow, fire fast. You probably have heard that. And anybody who's been in business has learned that that's really true. And so is measure twice, cut once. It's so tempting to hire to meet business needs and to rush that process. But one of the most important things that I've learned being in business is the importance of cultural compatibility. And here's what I mean by that, which is not something that's really legal and it's not something that's really in this presentation, but I want to explain what I mean. When I first started this law firm back in 2008, one of the things that I was most focused on is compatible skill set. I needed folks that knew what they were doing with respect to Stark and Anti-Kickback Statute, Patient Brokering Act, Medicare, Medicaid, all these laws and all these contractual things that we deal with on the M&A side of our business and on the business advisory corporate type work that we do as well. So I was really focused on, do you have the skill set? Do you have those chops? Here's what I found over years. I found the obvious, that essentially this is a human business. A law firm, IV hydration, physician practice, all of these are human businesses. We're not in the widget business. It's not a high-tech business, the purpose of which is to create widgets. It's actually human minds. The value that gets delivered in an accounting practice and a legal practice and IV hydration is predominantly, at the core, it's a human mind business. And your interaction with patients and colleagues and what have you is basically humans interacting with humans. So the most important thing that I learned in another human business, which is a law firm, is that The issue of value compatibility of values is essential. I had no idea that skill set was really secondary, and that cultural compatibility, that means similar values, not necessarily similar beliefs, but similar values are absolutely core and essential. It's a long-winded way of saying that you have to focus, if you're concerned about growing a business in a way that's stable and scalable, then the one part that you have to focus on an unexpectedly large basis is the human. Hire the human. Really focus on who this is, and is this person compatible with what you're trying to create. If, for example, your one of your core values in your business is caretaking, you want people that are caretakers. You want people who care about people, love people, and want to help them. If that's one of your core values, then you have to hire people who are caretakers, not just good clinicians, not just good technicians, but caretakers. They have a particular feel. They have a particular value system. They love taking care of people. So one of the core things, before I get into all the legal particulars, that I want to make sure that that takeaway is delivered is hire the human. And that is a process of assessing who somebody is. And that's a conversation, who they are, what they value, what they come from, what do they do, what do they enjoy, what do they think of people? Are they a people person? Are they fundamentally introverted? Are they more extroverted? Do you know the difference as an employer? You should. You need to know, and you need to become good at deciding whether somebody is compatible with who you are and how you want customers, patients, to feel, what you want their experience to be like. Okay? So that's probably one of the most important takeaways. It's not in the presentation, but I wanted to make the point, and hopefully that's helpful to you. Yeah, this is a disclaimer. I'm not going to read it. Yeah, everybody's going to have access to these slides, and so to the extent that they're helpful sitting in your folder and you get to go back to them from time to time, please do. So I'm not going to read everything. These are really discussion points for me as I go through this presentation. Hiring and firing. Let's focus on hiring for a bit. I mentioned already, hire slow, fire fast. Really be deliberate in terms of what kind of human being you're looking for, not just the skill set, what kind of human being. One of the ways that people get themselves in trouble is they go basically on, what does my business need? I better quickly fulfill it, and I'm just going to go with my gut. Listen, the truth is we all have guts, we all have instincts, we all have feelings and ability to assess people that way, and that's great. But I'm a big fan of trust but verify. And hiring slow includes doing background checks. Do background checks. Unfortunately, one of the things that humans are good at is concealing stuff that they don't want you to know. When they're in an audition phase, whether it's in a business relationship or a personal relationship, there are certain things that they know that are their best qualities, and they're going to lead with that. And other stuff that are human things, they might conceal it. So at least go the extra step. They're not terribly expensive. And background check anybody that you value in your business. Okay? There's one source right in front of you at HireRight. There's lots of other places to do it. How about drug testing? Please do that. Here's why. Some people will say, well, I don't have a drug-free workplace policy that's connected to my workers' comp insurance coverage. And I tell them, you know what, you're being hyper-technical. Drug tests, because unless you're comfortable with the idea that people are illegally using illegal substances and touching your patients and interacting with your customers, there's a very simple way to get that done. And quite frankly, we live in a world of where clinical professionals understand that and they respect it. So background check, yes. Drug test, yes. Personality tests are kind of interesting to me because there's like so many of them out there, and it's viewed as kind of touchy-feely. But and to be frank, I've never done them in any business I'm associated with. But I do have clients and buddies and friends that use them and love them. So if you like that kind of stuff and you like metrics, you should definitely dig into it. I'm personally am adverse to that. I'm not a big metric guy, but a lot of people are. And to the extent that that helps you determine compatibility, that's a great thing to do. Throughout this presentation, you're going to see Florida and California mentioned. Why? Because I did this presentation in California, so I pulled a bunch of California stuff. And I'm sitting in Florida right now. Our law firm is based in Florida, and while we give advice to people in all kinds of states, it's just easier for me to pick up the Florida specific stuff. That's why you're going to see Florida and California. Florida is an at-will state. That means that you get to hire and fire people because you feel like it. You don't even have to have a reason. So I can hire you on Monday, fire you on Tuesday, and say, you know what? I'm terminating you, quote, without cause, which means no reason, right? Many states are at-will states. California is not. But it's important to know that because there's two ways that actually three ways that your employees or independent contractors, and we'll talk about the difference, are going to have legal rights. One is if you have an employment agreement, if you have a contract with them, then their rights will be what the contract says. The second way that it's going to happen is in an employee handbook. A lot of people figure, well, I'll just get in touch with ADP and ADP is going to give me an employee handbook. That doesn't mean anything. I don't even have to read it. That's not true. In most states, employment handbooks are viewed as a contract between employer and employee. So when you have things like paid time off and leave policies and stuff like that, if that's in your employment handbook, you better make sure that you can live with the terms of it. I'd rather personally you not have an employee handbook if you're going to have an employee handbook that you don't follow. Employee handbooks are viewed as contracts. You have to follow them. Okay. The other awareness item has to do with restrictive covenants, and we'll dig into that a little bit. Restrictive covenants in various states are enforceable. In Florida, absolutely enforceable in Florida if they're reasonable as to geographic scope and duration. We'll talk about the specifics there in a bit. But those are really three big things that you're going to want to know in your state. Are you going to be able to let people go really quickly and simply for no reason? Is it an at-will state? Do you have employment agreements or employee handbooks? If you do, you need to really be comfortable with exactly what they say and mean. And what about restrictive covenants? And by restrictive covenants, I'm using some jargon. That means non-solicitation, confidentiality, and non-competition. Okay? Let's talk about when you should even have a written agreement, whether it's an employment agreement or an agreement in writing for an independent contractor. Let's walk through those issues. One of the things that you have to keep in mind when you go through this analysis of W-2 employee versus 1099, which is what I want to talk about, because I think that's a big issue in this space, in the IV hydration space. A lot of people have a lot of part-time people working in their mobile platform or their fixed site platform. And when you're talking about employees or people that are working part-time, that tends to lend itself to, hey, maybe they should be independent contractors, not W-2 employees. But before we get into the details of that, here's what you need to focus on and be aware of. The regulatory inclination. From an IRS perspective, from a Department of Labor perspective, everybody theoretically should be a W-2 employee. Why is that? Because there are taxes that go to the federal government and to the state government when you have somebody that's a W-2 employee. But they don't go to the state and federal government if they're a 1099 independent contractor. There's a tendency, there's a bias by the federal and state regulators to characterize people as W-2 employees, and you need to be aware of the bias, and you need to be aware of what they're looking at to make a convincing argument that your person really should have been a W-2, and therefore you owe a bunch of back taxes. Are you with me? Yeah. The federal and state government has a bias. And so every year they're kind of putting that noose around the neck of employers more and more to say, hey, we think that the folks working for you should be W-2 employees. And by the way, pay more taxes to us. That's just a reality. And when you're differentiating, and there'll be a bunch of stuff on your screen that will help guide you through the process of whether somebody is appropriately a W-2 or a 1099. But at the end of the day, I think simple is going to be better to at least give you something that you can work with, that you can remember. And I'll get to those simple things, but I want to put some of the complicated things in front of you, which this slide, hiring and firing, does. Let me skip ahead and then get to, here we go. So now we get into even more details that the IRS is looking at to determine whether somebody is rightly a W-2 versus a 1099. You see all this behavioral control, financial control, type of relationship. Generally speaking, the IRS and the Department of Labor think that somebody really is a W-2 employee when you have, not a 1099, when you have the ability to direct, supervise, and control them. Direction, supervision, control. Those are key factors. Now, there's a lot of words on your screen that come out of the IRS. It used to be a 20-point test. Now it's something else. And frankly, at some point, it'll be called something else. But it comes down to, are you directing, supervising, or controlling this person? That's one of the key things that will determine, hey, if you're doing that, that's probably a W-2 employee, should be a W-2 employee, not a 1099 independent contractor. Are you telling them when to be to work and when they can leave? Some of the other things, the other indicia of W-2 employee is you pay them benefits. You give them benefits, health insurance and things like that. One of the others, well, they work for you for more than 20 hours a week. Right? So if I could distill down the features that you should remember about what differentiates a W-2 from a 1099, I would, generally speaking, I would move to these factors. Number one, are they working for you 20 hours a week or more? If so, maybe should be a W-2 employee. Are you giving them benefits like health insurance, life insurance, things like that? Definitely leaning towards W-2 employee. If you want to make sure that you don't, that you have an independent contractor and they are not a W-2 employee, then put together an agreement in writing that makes sure that you're not exercising direction, supervision, and control, that you're not giving them benefits, that you're not telling them when to be, where to be. That's a collaborating kind of thing that you would agree on with them. When you have those kinds of features, okay, you have a 1099 relationship. That's supportable. Put it in writing so that when the IRS or the Department of Labor comes back and says, hey, I bet that's a W-2 employee and I bet you owe us some taxes, you can say, well, check out this agreement that my lawyers looked at. This is really legit. A 1099 relationship, not a W-2 relationship. Okay. Then we get to the issue of overtime, which is different from W-2 versus 1099. Overtime is an issue of, is the person exempt or non-exempt? And essentially, if you want to look into these categories, you can. You have them in the slide presentation, right? And when you go through it, what you'll find out is basically somebody that's working for you or for your business in a way that isn't a high-level executive, meaning they're there to perform services and to take care of patients, for example, they're not exempt. Okay? Somebody is an owner, they can be exempt. Somebody who is your CEO, COO, CFO, they can be exempt. But a nurse or an NP or a PA or a paramedic that is part of your staff that's there to see patients during defined hours on a predetermined basis, they're there Monday through Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it is, they will never be exempt. They will be non-exempt, which means you're subject to having to pay overtime for them. Okay? Let's talk about hiring and firing. One of the biggest tips I can give you is to really take a look at your handbooks and your contracts. If you're using handbooks and contracts, make sure that they give you the rights that you really want to have. So, for example, if you're in a state where you can let go of somebody for no reason, you're going to want a without cause termination provision. Okay? Why? Because when you have the ability to let go of somebody for no reason, you don't have a reason that you let them go. You don't need a reason to let them go. Why is that important? Because all of the litigation that happens, all of the lawsuits that happen from an employee that got treated wrong or didn't like how they were terminated, it all boils down to the reason for the termination. You terminated me because I'm a minority. You terminated me because I'm pregnant. You terminated me because I'm old. You terminated me for all these impermissible reasons, and you were wrong because you violated a law, an age discrimination law, for example, or a racial discrimination law. Or what about you didn't terminate them for any reason? You terminated them without cause. And you have the ability to do that in your employment agreements, your independent contractor agreements, and your handbook. That is an easy thing to accomplish, and it's probably one of the surest ways to avoid liability, legal liability, connected to you terminating somebody. That's important, right? Now, let me clarify. I'm not talking about your ability to escape unemployment compensation. That is a completely different issue, and frankly, that's determined by the state where you live and the laws of the state. And if your state laws are something like Florida state laws, they bend over backwards to give people unemployment compensation. So I'm not talking about that. And frankly, there's not a ton that you can do because states generally are inclined to give unemployment compensation. But the real issue is, can you terminate somebody and thereby avoid a lawsuit for retaliatory discharge or wrongful termination or breach of contract? Absolutely. You can do it very simply by having the right to terminate without cause and having that without cause termination provision in your employee handbook and in all of the contracts that you're using with everyone. It's incredibly important to be able to do that. Okay? Let's talk about a bad actor. Every now and then you get some outlandish situation where somebody's inappropriately touching patients, or they're saying terrible things to patients, or they're hurting patients, or they're hurting colleagues, or whatever, or they're acting in a horrible way towards your staff. I kind of go by this algorithm that's on the screen here, CSIDR, which is a terrible one because you can't remember it. CSIDR? I don't even know how you say that. Anyway, but here's the process that I strongly recommend that you go through if you have a complicated situation like that. Contact the lawyer, suspend the employee while investigating, investigate the alleged wrongdoing, document what you did during that investigation, the fact that you investigated, and then remediate any bad conduct. Now, this is a separate thing from being able to terminate somebody without cause, right? This is if you have to ensure corporate integrity because you're exposed to claims like racial discrimination, religious discrimination, age discrimination, anything like that, ADA violations. You're going to need to create a file and go through a process that protects you from allegations that you violated those federal and state protections. But if you've got a simpler situation where you don't have an older employee or a disabled employee or a racial minority or a religious issue where the person is saying, gosh, you discriminated me because I'm this particular religion, then great, you're in a simple category and you can just terminate somebody without cause because your employee agreement, your independent contractor agreement, and your employee handbook allows it. All right? Let's talk about Plan B. A lot of people figure, hey, when I want to let somebody go, I'm just going to follow the terms of the contract. My contract says, most contracts will say, you can let go of somebody for two reasons. One is for cause, which means for a reason that typically that is stated in the contract. And the second way to let them go is without cause, because your contract says we can terminate you without cause. Awesome, that's great. But one of the things that people need to keep in mind, employers should keep in mind, is that you're not limited to that. You're not limited to what the contract says. A lot of people will pick up the phone and talk to their lawyer and say, I got this situation, I want to let somebody go, what's the contract say? Well, the obligation of the lawyer obviously is to say, here are your options under the contract. But one of the other options that's not in the contract that you can create is what I call Plan B. Let's say the contract says you can let somebody go without cause with 90 days notice. But you've decided, you know what, I don't want to pay this person for 90 days. And your lawyer just told you you can let them go with 90 days notice for no reason. Or you can let them go for cause, but then you're exposed, as I mentioned earlier, when you terminate somebody for cause, you're exposed to lawsuits for retaliatory discharge, breach of contract, things like that. And you've decided, hey, I just want to let them go without cause. But you have to give them 90 days notice, perhaps, in your employment agreement. This is where we get into kind of a classic Plan B situation, where you might pick up the phone and create with whoever your advisor is, what's a better way? So, for example, in the situation where I've got a client that says, you know, I want to let somebody go, and their contract says 90 days without cause, that client may say to me, you know what, I don't want to keep them around and keep paying them for 90 days, right? So we might say, well, let's sit down with the person and say, look, there's two ways that we can go right now. We can terminate you for no cause, and then you're going to carry around the fact that you were terminated. And that might impact your ability to get other job down the road or feel good about whatever, and that may adversely impact you. What if you resign, we give you a check for 30 days, and you go about your business? In other words, Plan B is a creative way to deal with a termination that isn't stated in the contract. Just because your contract says what it says doesn't mean that you can't sculpt a better way out that's better for your business and also better for the terminated person. Tip 4, when you learn something from firing somebody, use that to improve your handbook, policies, and contracts. Every time you go through a termination situation, you're going to learn something. You're going to learn typically that your contracts or your handbook or your policies didn't see that one coming, which is one of the reasons why I'm a huge fan of being able to terminate people without cause. Why? Because if you try to come up with all the reasons for which you might be able to terminate somebody, I guarantee you it's just a question of time before you're faced with the opportunity to terminate somebody for a situation you've never heard of. And after 35 years of advising healthcare businesses and professionals on issues like this, some of the situations that we see are bizarre. And what you're going to want to do is use that to take a step back every time. and ask yourself something that we can use, something that we can improve our contracts or our handbook with, right? Final tip here. Hire somebody to come over and look at your HR files and make sure that you have what you need. Believe it or not, a lot of folks, even sophisticated businesses, just have terrible HR files with inadequate content. That's really important from a compliance perspective when you're dealing with the Department of Labor, the IRS, and also your exposure to claims like retaliatory discharge and breach of contract. You're going to want to make sure that your HR files are what we call complete. Let's talk about the current landscape when it comes to hiring and firing. I would say, especially in the healthcare space, when you talk about healthcare regulations, the current landscape involves confusing people, oversimplifying, and frightening them. And the only medicine I know for that, and I'll give you an example before I give you the medicine for it. The anti-kickback statute, for example, is such a huge thing with such big teeth that talks about what you can do, compensation. You can't pay somebody for referring business or generating business for you, and you can't get paid for that. Now, that's a federal law, and it's overblown, meaning people's understanding of it tends to loom so heavily over their business that it can be somewhat paralyzing. That's especially the case when you're dealing with a cash-based business like IV hydration. I have yet to come across an IV hydration business that submits claims for reimbursement to any insurance company because it's not a covered service. Not a covered service, which is kind of a growing thing in our culture, that all wellness things are not covered. Just about all wellness things are not covered by insurance. Okay. So if you understand that these laws are in place, and that they're hard to wrap your head around, and that they do have a kind of a stultifying effect on how you do business and how you think about things, then one of the things that is really important is that you simplify these things and find out what applies. So, for example, those of you who come from a clinical background, you might have a medical practice, or you worked in a hospital or a home health agency, or own one, or what have you, and you know the anti-kickback statute, the civil monetary penalties, and safe harbors and things like that. You know that stuff inside and out. And that may loom heavily over when you either add IV hydration to your business or form a separate company that just does IV hydration, which is, generally speaking, more advisable, because if you have a pure cash business like IV hydration, you only have some laws that apply to you, not all of them. So the really scary, toothy ones like the AKS don't apply to that IV hydration business that is purely cash-based. That's important to keep in mind. It's important to know. So when you design your business model, it's good to consult with somebody that can help you segregate businesses, including tax ID numbers, by legal complexity. If it's a medical practice, home health agency, skilled nursing, what have you, some of the deepest level of legal complexity and attention to detail to ensure that you're compliant. The shallow end of the pool, however, there's lots of them. Med spas, IV hydration is in the shallower end of the pool. So what you're not going to want to do is to burden that shallow end business by dumping it into a business that's regulated with laws that are incredibly high stakes laws. Let's talk about marketing. This is an example, and I bring this up because it's often the case that your employees or contractors are focused on marketing. What you have in front of you, and it's not the anti-kickback statute, it's the anti-kickback statute. That's my typing, by the way. Anyway, and there are state laws that basically say, hey, don't pay people for generating business or referring patients. Well, you're in a cash-based business. This law, the anti-kickback statute, doesn't apply to purely cash-based businesses. It only applies to businesses that receive Medicare, Medicaid, CHAMPUS, or TRICARE, federal or state health care program monies, which I have yet to see an IV hydration business participate in. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a specific kind of employee, one that provides marketing services, because some of you may have that and you may want to know about that. So we have this statute which applies when you have federal or state healthcare program monies, and it applies only when you're taking those kind of dollars, and IV hydration doesn't typically do it. So how do you, just to skip to the conclusion, how do you do it right in a low-risk way? I've got this healthcare marketing expert, they're a W-2 employee, or they're a 1099. How do you do it? Here's how you do it. You make them a bona fide employee, or you comply with a safe harbor that we call PSA for short. Bona fide employee exception says, hey, put their services in a written agreement, what they're going to do, what they're going to get, specify their compensation in advance, and don't vary it based on the value or volume of business generated or referrals made. That's what it says. Now, the PSA is for independent contractors, and it says something very similar. Here's the frustration when you're dealing with marketing employees. You want to pay them for being successful. You want to pay them for being successful, meaning generating business, referring patients. But you have these laws at state level and federal level that weigh against it. How do you do it right? Well, you structure it so it complies with these two exceptions or two provisions. Here's the bona fide employee exception, right? Tells you how to do it. I'm just flipping through. And here's the personal services arrangement safe harbor. That's for an independent contractor. Tells you exactly how to do it. The hard thing is this part that I just underlined, which is in both laws. You can't take into account the value or volume of any referrals or business generated. There are so many options available to you to reward people. For example, customer satisfaction. Is that rewarding patient generation? No. Is that compensating for patient referral? No. How about customer retention? How about returning patients or returning customers? Can you reward for that? Sure you can. Bottom line, when it comes to marketing employees or contractors, if you don't have any state or federal health care program dollars, the Stark Law and the anti-kickback statute doesn't apply. You might have some weird state-based law that acts in a similar way, like we do in Florida, the Florida Patient Brokering Act. If there's no designated health services, then Stark Law doesn't apply. IV hydration is not a designated health service. If there's no physician involved, Stark Law doesn't apply. So what we're doing is we're stripping away in a tax ID number in a business that is just IV hydration. We're pulling out all of the complexity, and we're simplifying and narrowing the scope and the kinds of laws that apply. But you're still left with this issue when you're dealing with marketing folks, that percentage-based sales or marketing compensation arrangements do implicate often some state laws, and you have to be more creative with paying them for success. Here's some other authority as it relates to the OIG activity when it comes with dealing with marketing employees. And we use this to create low-risk compensation arrangements with marketing employees and contractors, and it might be helpful to you to see what they look at and what they consider to be persuasive and important in things that they didn't like. Now, mind you, the Office of Inspector General is talking in these cases, the advisory opinion and in the cases, about situations where a healthcare provider takes Medicare, Medicaid, CHAMPUS, or TRICARE. IV hydration businesses, unless they're part of a practice, don't do it. Unless they're part of a business that does it, they don't do that. So you're never going to hear from the OIG, if in fact your business is pure IV hydration and that's all you're doing. But if you want to understand how the biggest law enforcement authority in healthcare space, the Office of Inspector General, looks at marketing and marketing relationships, whether it's with a W-2 employee or a 1099, read through this, because you can push your arrangements into the lowest possible risk relationship and thereby stay off the radar screen of state regulatory bodies and also federal regulatory bodies. And by the way, I keep talking about if you have a business that is just IV hydration. A lot of people don't. A lot of people add IV hydration to existing healthcare businesses that do take state or federal healthcare program monies. And if that's the case, complying, being sensitive to what the OIG says and complying with the anti-kickback statute, safe harbors, that's not optional. That's mandatory. Okay? So still, examples of what the OIG is upset by, what they focus on. If your business doesn't do business with Medicare, Medicaid, Champus, and TRICARE, then, and you don't have a state law like we do in Florida that acts a little bit like the anti-kickback statute, then you don't have to be mindful of these things as you would, for example, in Florida. Okay? So that's there for your study guides. All right? Conclusions when it relates to marketing employees. That area of the law, marketing, whether you're doing it with W-2 employees or 1099s, it's complicated. It's always evolving. There's always regulatory focus and prosecutions in this space. So we're constantly learning, and the prosecutorial direction and focus is constantly changing, which is why we educate so much and so frequently on that. Assertions like, hey, paying a marketer on a percentage basis violates the anti-kickback statute. It's overly stated, especially when you're dealing with businesses that don't submit claims for reimbursement to a state or federal healthcare program. The feds have actually given us plenty to work with in identifying permissible marketing and sales relationships, and those are some of the examples are on previous slides. And then finally, when you're dealing with, I just want to make this point so that you can understand. I think a lot of people that haven't worked with lawyers, especially healthcare lawyers, misunderstand that the role of the healthcare lawyer is not to simply get your question and answer the question. And I'll tell you why. Most of the legal answers that have any value to you as a business owner, the answers exist in the gray. The answers exist in the gray. When you're talking about probate and real estate law, that law has generally been set since England. You know, it's been there since we were an English colony. That stuff doesn't really change. Healthcare law changes all the time. And it's so black and white often that the only way that you can effectively get advice that you can use is if you get with somebody that will explain the laws, the options, and the risks of each option so that you can make a good business decision. Nearly every useful piece of advice you'll ever get from a healthcare lawyer that has economic value in your business will put you somewhere in the gray, and their obligation to you is to teach you the law, the options, and the risks so that you can continually stay in business by staying in the light shade of gray. I hope that's really helpful to you today. I had fun doing it, and I look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks so much.